Welcome to the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. We're going to shake things up a bit in the corporate world.
Oh, yeah.
You give us all these excerpts from Robert Townsend's Further Up the Organization. And it seems like you're really looking for some advice that's less, business as usual and more let's get real kind of stuff.
I think what's fascinating about Townsend is that he's not just some, ivory tower theorist.
Right.
Like, he actually took Avis Rent-A-Car from a company with 13 years of no profit to making $5 million in just 3 years.
Wow.
So when he talks about ditching conventional wisdom, he's speaking from experience.
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive right in to one of his most eyebrow-raising ideas.
Okay.
He really challenges this whole notion of constantly, endlessly searching for good people.
Yeah.
He thinks that the problem isn't a lack of talent, it's bad management.
Right.
Have you ever worked in a place where management just assumed everyone was just looking for a way to slack off?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's classic Theory X. This idea that people are inherently lazy and need to be controlled.
Right.
Townsend kind of flips that on its head with Theory Y,
Okay.
arguing that people actually want to do good work.
Interesting.
They're intrinsically motivated if you give them the right environment.
So how do we create this environment?
Well, get ready for it.
Okay.
He says fire entire departments. Advertising, public relations, even legal.
He's not messing around?
No, he's not. He argues that these departments often become bloated and bureaucratic.
Right.
They hinder agility and innovation.
So he's not saying get rid of those functions altogether.
No, not necessarily.
It's more about, are they really serving the company?
Yeah.
Or are they just roadblocks?
Yeah. Are they actually helping, or are they just getting in the way?
He believes in trusting your employees to handle tasks that are traditionally delegated to these departments,
Right.
leading to more direct communication and employee ownership. He gives this great example of a company ditching their purchasing department. He calls it internal socialism.
I love that.
Instead of having the central department control everything,
Right.
they let each department handle its own purchasing.
The result: increased morality, potential cost savings.
So it's all about cutting through the red tape,
Yeah.
trusting people to do their jobs.
Exactly.
Townsend is a huge advocate for simplicity and directness in all things.
Totally.
No corporate jargon,
Nope.
no office politics. One of his key philosophies is do it now.
I love that.
You need to talk to someone. Pick up the phone and call them.
Right then and there.
No memos, no scheduling a meeting 3 weeks out, just action.
Just do it.
And remember those departments he wanted to fire?
Yeah.
He gives specific advice on how to restructure, with advertising.
Oh, yeah.
He says, bring in a top-notch new agency and actually listen to their expertise.
Yeah.
No micromanaging.
Let the experts be experts.
So it seems like Townsend really wants to flip the traditional corporate pyramid on its head.
He does.
It's not just about simplifying. It's about putting power and decision-making in the hands of the people who are actually doing the work.
Exactly. He even uses this anecdote about the legendary ad man Bill Bernbach,
Oh, no.
who preferred a round conference table to a rectangular one
Interesting. Why?
because he wanted to sit closer to junior employees
Oh, wow.
and be more likely to see the light of conviction in their eyes.
That's amazing.
He believed good ideas could come from anyone regardless of their position in the company.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And, all this ties into another one of Townsend's key principles, embracing mistakes.
Absolutely.
He argues that mistakes are inevitable
Mm-hmm.
and even necessary for growth.
Yeah, he's very open about his own less than stellar track record at Avis,
Right.
sharing that 2 out of 3 of his decisions were wrong.
Wow.
But he argues that it's not about being perfect.
It's about learning.
Yeah, it's about learning from those mistakes and moving forward.
So he's advocating for a culture where people aren't afraid to take risks and try new things, even if it means they might mess up sometimes.
Exactly. And this brings us to another area where Townsend's thinking is really different: compensation. He's a big critic of excessive executive pay
Yeah, that's a hot topic.
and advocates for a system where everyone in the company, from the CEO to the janitor, shares in the company's success.
Wow.
He even suggests allocating 15% of pre-tax profits to a profit-sharing pool for all employees.
That's a big deal.
And he put his money where his mouth is. When he took over at Avis, he insisted on a lower salary for himself
Really?
to maintain a more equitable compensation system.
I mean, think about that for a second.
I know, right?
In today's world, how many CEOs would willingly take a pay cut to ensure their employees are fairly compensated?
Not many.
It's like the opposite of how we typically think about corporate leadership.
Yeah. It really goes against the grain.
It seems like Townsend's whole approach is about putting people first. Creating a workplace where people feel valued, empowered, and motivated to do their best work.
And this people-centric approach isn't just some feel-good philosophy.
Right.
Townsend argues it's ultimately good for business.
Of course.
When people feel invested in the company's success, they'll work harder and be more innovative.
It's a win-win situation.
Exactly.
So far, we've covered Townsend's take on people, departments, leadership, even compensation.
It's a lot.
And, we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to unpack here.
There is.
Another thing Townsend really goes after is consultants.
Oh, yeah. What's his beef with them?
He sees relying on them as like a crutch, a sign of weak leadership.
So if you're always calling in the consultants,
yeah,
it means your management team isn't cutting it.
He might say that.
Yeah.
He argues that real managers should be able to solve problems and make decisions themselves without always needing that outside help.
It makes me think about all those articles about the explosion of the consulting industry. Is that what he was getting at?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. His book came out before we saw this massive growth in consulting.
Right.
But his critique of over-reliance on them still rings true. If leadership isn't empowered to make decisions and solve problems.
Then who's really in charge?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Townsend's not a fan of consultants.
Not really.
What about technology? I mean, this book was written back in the 80s.
Yeah.
When computers were just becoming commonplace in offices.
Yeah, he actually had some pretty strong opinions about them.
I bet.
Remember, this was the era of giant mainframes and punch cards?
Oh, yeah.
And he saw how early computers often added complexity and bureaucracy rather than simplifying things.
He even called them big, expensive, fast, dumb adding machine typewriters.
I love that quote.
It's true, though. Sometimes new technology just creates more headaches.
For sure. And then there's the human element.
Right.
Townsend had this whole thing about computer priests.
Okay.
Technicians who built up this mystique around computers.
Yeah.
Making them seem more complicated than they really were.
So the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
Who use technology to make themselves indispensable.
That's it. And he saw this happening back then.
Right.
And you could argue it's even more prevalent today.
Totally.
He even suggests hiring a small independent software company to come in, plan your system, and then get out.
Interesting.
That way you avoid creating a whole in-house IT department.
Right.
That might just become another layer of bureaucracy.
So again, keeping it simple, keeping it streamlined.
Always.
Seems to be his mantra for everything.
Pretty much.
Even something like the annual office party.
Oh, yeah. He had some hilarious ideas about that.
I bet.
He lays out this whole step-by-step guide
Uh-oh.
on how not to do the office party.
Okay.
He basically takes all the worst cliches of those awkward office gatherings and turns them up to 11.
Like matching outfits in trust falls.
Maybe not that bad.
Okay.
But he does suggest things like inviting spouses so bosses and their secretaries don't enjoy dancing together.
Oh.
And combining the office party with the quarter-century club party.
When?
So all your employees can see living examples.
Oh, my God.
Of what 25 years at the company will do to them.
I think I'd rather take my chances with the trust falls.
Right.
But I get it. He's making a point.
Yeah.
About authenticity. Genuine connection.
Absolutely. He's all about cutting through the BS.
Right.
Creating a culture where people can just be themselves.
And that ties into his views on leadership, too.
Totally. He says that true leaders walk behind their people.
Oh, wow.
Not in front of them.
I love that imagery.
Right. It really flips the script on that whole command and control style.
It does.
It's about serving others, not wielding power. He also emphasizes conviction, having a deep belief in your mission.
And inspiring others to follow.
So it's not just about building an empire for your own ego.
No.
It's about doing something worthwhile.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder how many companies today are really driven by that.
That's a good question.
Versus just chasing profits or market share.
Yeah, are they actually trying to make a difference?
Right.
Or are they just in it for themselves?
Townsend argues that the traditional corporate pyramid is fundamentally flawed.
He does. He thinks this rigid structure stifles creativity.
Okay.
Slows down decision-making, creates all sorts of unnecessary bureaucracy.
He even calls the dotted lines on an org chart dead giveaways.
Yeah, I love that.
Because they often indicate troubled relationships.
Yeah.
Unresolved conflicts.
Right. Those dotted lines mean trouble.
So what's the alternative?
Flatten the pyramid.
Okay.
Empower people at all levels.
Right.
And give them the freedom to make decisions and take ownership.
So it's all about agility and responsiveness. Exactly. It's about being able to adapt quickly to change.
Which is more important than ever these days.
Definitely. And this all circles back to embracing mistakes. He believes mistakes are not only inevitable,
right,
but necessary for growth.
You have to be willing to experiment.
Yeah, to try new things.
And not be afraid to fail.
Exactly. He sees this willingness to take risks as increasingly lacking in the corporate world.
Why is that?
I think people are so afraid of making a mistake.
Right.
That they get paralyzed.
They don't want to do anything.
Exactly. He calls these folks paper tigers.
Oh, yeah.
Managers who are more concerned with filling out forms.
Oh, no.
Writing reports.
Not actually getting things done.
Than actually making a difference.
It makes me think about what we were saying earlier about consultants. Are we seeing more of these paper tigers?
It's possible.
Because real decision-making is being outsourced.
Yeah, I think it's something to consider.
If managers are constantly second-guessing themselves and afraid to take ownership,
then who's really running the show?
Townsend would say it's the consultants.
Probably.
Who benefit from this culture of fear and indecision.
Yeah, they're the ones who swoop in and save the day.
He argues that managers need to be more present.
Yeah.
More engaged.
Working alongside their team.
Talking to customers.
Yeah, getting their hands dirty.
Not just hiding behind a desk, pushing paper.
Exactly.
He's advocating for a more hands-on leadership style.
Totally. One that's focused on results and empowering employees.
It's so refreshing to hear someone challenge the status quo like this.
I know, right?
He's basically saying, throw out the rule book.
Yeah.
Build organizations that are more human-centered and results-oriented.
It's about time someone said it.
And his ideas feel more relevant than ever.
Totally.
In today's business world.
Things are changing so fast.
Exactly. Companies need to be agile, innovative, adaptable to survive. And you can't do that with a bunch of paper tigers.
Nope.
Hiding behind a mountain of bureaucracy.
You need people who are willing to take risks and make decisions.
So far, we've explored Townsend's unconventional views on everything from consultants to office parties.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We've seen how he challenges traditional hierarchies, advocates for a more human-centered approach to leadership,
absolutely,
and encourages a culture of risk-taking and innovation.
He wants us to rethink everything.
We've talked about a lot of Townsend's big picture ideas.
Yeah.
But he also gets into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
With some really practical advice.
He does.
Like his approach to hiring.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting.
Oh, yeah. He has some pretty unconventional ideas there.
Like what?
Well, instead of getting hung up on credentials and years of experience, he suggests looking for people who have a track record of success.
Okay.
Even if it's in a completely different industry.
So you're saying he'd rather hire a rock star salesperson to run the accounting department?
Maybe not that extreme, but you get the idea. It's about finding people with the right attitude, the drive, the willingness to learn.
Got it.
He believes that skills can be taught, but you can't teach someone to be a winner.
So it's about potential.
Exactly. Would you rather invest in someone who's consistently exceeded expectations?
Right.
Or someone who's just been coasting along doing the bare minimum?
That makes sense.
And once you've hired these winners,
yeah,
how do you keep them motivated?
Good question.
Townsend emphasizes giving people real responsibility, delegating authority, letting them own their work.
He talks about giving people whole jobs, not just fragmented tasks.
Exactly. He wants people to feel like they're making a real contribution, not just cogs in a machine.
And this ties into his views on communication too, right?
Absolutely. He's all about transparency and open dialogue.
So no more hiding information or keeping people in the dark.
He hates secrecy.
Okay.
He thinks it breeds mistrust.
Right.
Undermines morale.
He even suggests posting everyone's salaries on the bulletin board.
Yeah, that's one of his more radical ideas.
I can imagine that would cause some drama.
It would definitely shake things up.
But I get his point.
Yeah.
If money is the scorecard,
which it is in the business world,
everyone should be able to see the score.
It's about fairness, a level playing field.
And what about those tough conversations that every manager dreads?
Oh, yeah, like giving critical feedback or firing someone.
Exactly.
Townsend has a simple rule. Be swift and decisive.
Just rip off the Band-Aid.
Exactly. Delaying the inevitable only makes it worse.
So no sugarcoating.
Nope. Be direct and honest.
Even if it's uncomfortable.
Especially if it's uncomfortable.
Speaking of tough situations.
Yeah.
Townsend also has some thoughts on lawyers.
Oh, yeah. He sees lawyers as a necessary evil.
Well, every company has to deal with them at some point.
That's true. But he has some tips.
Okay, I'm listening.
He advises choosing lawyers who are active in politics.
Interesting. Why?
Because they often have valuable insights into the local landscape.
So it's not just about their legal expertise. It's about their connections and understanding the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He also stresses finding a lawyer who speaks plain English.
Yeah. No legalese.
No jargon, just clear communication.
Good advice.
And finally, Townsend has some wisdom for managing our own time and energy.
Which feels more relevant than ever these days.
I know, right? Everyone's so overwhelmed.
Exactly.
His golden rule is say no more often.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is, but we're often too quick to say yes.
Right, and then we end up overcommitted and stressed out.
Exactly. It's about setting boundaries and protecting our time.
Which is so hard.
And this is where his do-it-now philosophy comes in handy.
Right.
If something can be done, immediately do it.
No procrastination.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into further up the organization, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think Townsend challenges us to rethink our assumptions about how businesses should be run. He encourages us to question the status quo, experiment with new ways of doing things, and empower our employees.
Right.
He wants us to create organizations that are more human, more efficient, and ultimately more successful.
It's about putting people first.
Yeah.
Creating a workplace where everyone feels valued and respected.
Absolutely.
And has the opportunity to do their best work.
And then maybe most importantly, he reminds us to be bold, to challenge conventional wisdom and never stop innovating.
Townsend's ideas may have been written decades ago.
Yeah.
But they still feel so relevant today.
They do.
It's a call to action for all of us to think differently about how we work and how we lead.
Now, here's something to ponder.
Okay.
If Townsend were to analyze the company you work for today, what would he recommend changing?
Interesting.
Would you agree with his assessment?
That's something to think about.
It is.
And that's the deep dive for today.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with more insightful deep dives from your stack of sources soon. See you next time on the Facilitators Deep Dive Podcast, your podcast on your way to facilitation mastery. Until next time.
See you then.